Every time you create a macro with a recording process, you are, in effect, writing a program in Visual Basic, or to be more precise, Visual Basic for Applications. In this workbook, we're looking at, let's say, any worksheet. We happen to be looking currently at current staff. If we want to view the VBA code, we can press Alt F11. If we didn't know that shortcut, we could go to the Developer tab and the far left button, Visual Basic. Once again, note that keystroke shortcut, Alt F11. It will come in handy many times as we work with Excel macros. Click the button or press Alt F11. We're into the world of Visual Basic, or we press Alt F11. We're back into the Excel environment. Back and forth. Toggle with Alt F11. Now, the more you work with macros, the more you will begin to understand VBA, and in different degrees, perhaps you'll be working with it more closely. It varies widely depending upon the person and what you're trying to do with macros. Now, this window isn't always what we see right now. For many people, the two most important windows, and they're nearly always present, are the VBA project window, typically on the upper left side, and then to the right of it, occupying the bulk of the screen, the code window. If neither of those is present, you want to go to the View tab, and there's where we see code. That's the first entry. If the code window is not visible on the right, you definitely want to see this, View Code. And also the VBA project window, it's called Project Explorer. We want to see that as well too. The properties window below is going to be handy occasionally, although not nearly as important as the other two. Now, anytime you go to this window, you do see the current workbook listed over on the left-hand side. If there are other workbooks open, you will see those names. Sometimes the view here is collapsed. So off to the left, here's a minus. I'm going to click it. Now, that also changed the code window, but if the view looks like this, it sometimes might throw you. But by clicking the pluses just to the left of, for example, personal, that's the personal macro workbook. More about that in the next two movies. Click the plus there. We expose aspects of it, including modules. Modules are where macros are stored. So in the current workbook, that's called Workbook with Macros, click the plus if it hasn't been expanded. We will see modules, and sometimes you'll see more than one module. You can rename the modules by way of the properties window below. If you haven't named them, every time you open this workbook and create a new macro, it will go into a new module. And so over time, you might want to consolidate these. So here we see module 1, and you want to double click these to see what's in them, as I just did here for module 1. This is a macro stored in module 1. If I double click module 2, there could be another one or two there. If I double click utility, there might be one there. I could keep them all in their separate modules or combine them into one. At different points, based on the nature of the macros, you might want to categorize them differently, give them different module names, although that's not critical. Now, within the macro code itself, I'm going to double click module 2. And as we look at the code, this is going to be true of all macros. Anytime you see green, that is not code, that is a comment, and you always see a single quote on the left-hand side. You can add your own comments. When you record a macro, the name you gave the macro is repeated right here. If you provided a description, you'll see that there as well. If you didn't, you won't see that line. If you provided a keystroke shortcut, you will see this kind of a line. Do not in any way assume that if you change what we see here, that you're changing the keystroke shortcut. That will not work. So don't consider this as a way to change it. That's a documentation tool. Often, just for the sake of taking up less space, I get rid of these two rows automatically because it's simply a repeat of the name. But you can insert your own spaces anytime you wish. Certain keywords appear in blue. If everything here has been recorded, you never worry about that. There will be times when you type in some new code, and at certain points you'll see the code turn blue or not. Also, as a general approach, if you are typing code, always type in lowercase. Certain keywords will be recognized and they'll be capitalized. More about that in later movies. There will be times too when you look at certain code and you'll recognize that the code is longer than it needs to be. Here's a paste special line here. Because some of these are defaults, we could remove some of the code. Now again, that's not critical and it's not harmful that the code is longer, but sometimes you just want it to look a little tighter, a little more compact. But you don't want to be too bogged down at first with understanding every single line. That's just not likely to happen. It's so easy to record this rather than somehow trying to look up what it is that you might want to type. Although we certainly can type code here, many times it's going to be much, much easier to record the process. Think it out that way. And remember, we've got different modules over here. Now, if I want to combine the first two, for example, I might want to take this code here and put it next to the macro that's in module 1. Now I'm double-clicking module 1. We see that code. I want to put those two together in the same module. So I'll go to module 2 here. I just double-clicked it. I'm going to highlight all this. I could copy or cut it and then come back and get rid of it if I copied it. And we've got a menu over here with edit. We can certainly use cut, copy that way, or the keystroke shortcut. Maybe I'll use a cut here. Could have pressed Control X. I'll go to module 1, click below the other macro right down here at the bottom and paste it. Control V or go to the menu, edit, paste. There it is. Now module 2 doesn't have anything in it anymore. So I could right click module 2 and remove it. I don't want to export it anywhere. It's gone. So this is called module 1. I might come back and give that a better name. Maybe these are formatting type tools, or maybe they're just selection tools. Maybe I'll give it a name. Now you can't change module 1 right here where we see it, but in the properties window below, and if it's not available, you can choose view in properties window. It will become available. Down here below where we see name in module 1, I'm going to highlight this and I'll just give it a different name, a name that maybe encompasses what these two macros do, even though they're different from one another. So I'll call them selection. Maybe I'll use macros. Can't use spaces in there. Selection macros. Okay. There they are. So we changed the name of the module. Not critical, but nevertheless handy. So at different times throughout this course too, and particularly in subsequent movies, as we talk more and more about adjusting macros and creating them, we'll talk more about this environment. Again, it can be intimidating at first if you let it. Some people do take a strong interest in VBA, and they might take a course or two. There are courses available at lynda.com. They might be available also at your local community college, something like that. Some people take a boot camp kind of course, 5 days a week, that sort of thing. But the need for VBA varies widely with Excel users. And I know a lot of proficient Excel users who use macros a lot who aren't necessarily expert at VBA, and they don't need to be either. So it's an environment you want to become more comfortable with. I suggest every time you create a macro, look at VBA simply by pressing Alt F11, move back and forth, get a little bit familiar with it. Over time, you'd be surprised how much you will absorb. Alt F11, we're right back into Excel. Remember, at any time, we can get to our Visual Basic environment, but with Alt F11. By the way, if you hold down Alt too long, sometimes you see the numbers that appear up in the menu. That's not really a problem. If F11 doesn't work immediately, sometimes you'll have to press Escape. But we toggle back and forth. We become familiar with the VBA environment. And there's a lot more about that in subsequent chapters as we build longer macros.